The mockery echoed through the polished corridors of the Galactic Racing Academy as Maya Torres walked toward the simulation bay. Behind her, a group of Zentari cadets chittered in their native tongue, their crystalline voices carrying just enough galactic standard for her to understand. "Lucky," one of them said, the word dripping with disdain. "What kind of Callsign is that for a pilot?" Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. 3 months at the academy had taught her that responding only encouraged them. The Zentari, with their 4 arms and compound eyes, considered themselves the galaxy's natural pilots. Their reaction time was 3 times faster than any humans, and their spatial awareness was legendary. To them, humans were clumsy newcomers who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. The simulation bay buzzed with activity as cadets from dozens of species prepared for the qualifying rounds. Maya found her assigned pod and began the pre-flight checks, her hands moving with practiced efficiency across the holographic controls. The Void Run Championship was the most prestigious racing event in known space, and qualifying was harder than surviving a black hole's event horizon. "Torres," came a gravelly voice behind her. She turned to see Commander Thax, the Academy's Corvanian flight instructor. His reptilian features were unreadable, but his tone carried its usual disappointment. "Your simulation scores are adequate, but adequate won't survive the Void Run. I understand, sir." "Do you?" Thax's golden eyes narrowed. The current record was set by pilot Callsign of the Vorthan Empire 285 years ago. 6 minutes and 47 seconds through the nebula of screaming winds, past the gravity wells of doom, and across the stellar graveyard. In that time, 132 other pilots have died attempting to break it. Maya nodded, her throat dry. The Void Run wasn't just a race, it was a death sentence with a finish line. "Your species has only been spacefaring for 3 centuries, Thax continued. "Perhaps it's time to accept that some achievements are beyond human capability." As the commander walked away, Maya felt the familiar fire kindle in her chest. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe, it's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. The dismissive words of her instructors and classmates had become fuel for something deeper. A determination that ran in her very DNA. She climbed into the simulation pod and activated the systems. The virtual cockpit materialized around her, identical to the racing ships used in the actual championship. As the countdown began, Maya closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother's stories of the first human pilots who had dared to leave Earth's atmosphere. They had been called crazy too. The simulation launched, and Maya found herself hurtling through a recreation of the Void Run course. The nebula of screaming winds lived up to its name, electromagnetic storms that could fry a ship's systems in seconds, while gravitational anomalies twisted spacetime into impossible configurations. Most pilots relied on their ship's computer to navigate the chaos, following predetermined paths calculated by artificial intelligence. But Maya had learned something during her months at the academy. While alien pilots were faster and more precise, they lacked something uniquely human, the ability to see patterns where none should exist, to trust instinct over calculation. As she dove into the nebula's heart, she didn't follow the computer's suggested route. Instead, she followed her gut. The pod shuddered as she pushed her virtual ship beyond its recommended limits, dancing between gravitational wells that should have torn her apart. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. On the controls. This was what humans did. They adapted, they improvised, they found ways to survive against impossible odds. When the simulation ended, Maya expected to see another mediocre time. Instead, her display showed something that made her blood freeze. 6 minutes and 52 seconds. Only 5 seconds slower than the ancient record, and faster than any qualifying time in over a century. The simulation bay had gone silent. News of Maya's simulation run spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, crowds of alien cadets gathered outside the simulation bay, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, and harmonics that roughly translated to disbelief. "It has to be a malfunction," insisted Vorik, a Zentari pilot whose 4 arms moved in agitated gestures. No human could achieve such a time. Maya ignored them as she prepared for the first qualifying round. The actual ships were sleek, predatory. Things living metal that bonded with their pilots through neural interfaces. Each vessel was equipped with consciousness-responsive controls that adapted to the pilot's thought patterns. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed, yet another reminder of how far behind Earth remained in the galactic hierarchy. The qualifying course was a simplified version of the Void Run, designed to eliminate the weakest pilots, without actually killing them. Maya strapped herself into the cockpit and felt the neural interface connect with her mind. The ship's artificial intelligence whispered in her thoughts, offering tactical suggestions and hazard warnings in a voice like crystalline wind chimes. "Pilot Torres," the AI said, "I detect elevated stress hormones and irregular heartbeat patterns. Recommend sedative injection." "Negative," Maya replied. "I need to feel everything." The AI's confusion was palpable. Most pilots sought to minimize emotional interference, relying on cold calculation and perfect execution. But Maya had learned something during her months of study. Human emotions weren't weaknesses to be suppressed. They were data, instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. The course began with a launch from the Academy's orbital platform. 27 pilots from across the galaxy shot forward simultaneously, their ships becoming streaks of light. Against the star field, Maya found herself in the middle of the pack, surrounded by aliens whose species had been mastering space travel when humans were still discovering fire. The first obstacle was the Ribbon Mesa, series of energy barriers that shifted and twisted in complex patterns. Most pilots approached it methodically, their ship's computers calculating optimal paths through the maze. But Maya saw something different. Where the aliens saw barriers, she saw a rhythm, a dance of energy that followed an almost musical pattern. She dove into the maze at full speed, her ship weaving between the energy ribbons like a needle through fabric. The AI screamed warnings in her mind, but Maya trusted her instincts. The barriers weren't random, they were following the gravitational influence of a nearby pulsar, creating a pattern that repeated every 17 seconds. Maya emerged from the maze in third place, having gained 14 positions in less than a minute. Behind her, she could hear the chatter of confused alien pilots trying to understand how a human had navigated the maze so quickly. The second obstacle was the Gravity Well Gardens, a cluster of artificial black holes that created a three-dimensional maze of twisted space-time. Here, the alien pilots' superior spatial awareness should have given them an insurmountable advantage. Their brains could process the complex gravitational mathematics instinctively, while human minds required computer assistance to avoid being spaghettified. But Maya had spent her childhood playing in Earth's oceans, diving beneath the waves where currents and pressures created their own three-dimensional maze. She approached the gravity wells not as mathematical obstacles, but as currents to ride. Her ship danced between the event horizons, using the gravitational forces to slingshot from one well to another. The technique was insane by galactic standards. Every alien pilot had been taught to minimize gravitational influence, to plot careful courses that avoided the well's pull. Maya embraced it, letting the black holes accelerate her ship to velocities that made the AI's alarms scream in terror. She shot out of the Gravity Well Gardens in first place, her ship's hull glowing from the exotic radiation. The finish line stretched ahead, marked by a series of sensor buoys that would record her qualifying time. Maya crossed the line with a time that stunned the Academy's observers. Not only had she qualified for the championship, but she had posted the fastest qualifying time in over 50 years. In the viewing galleries, alien spectators fell silent as the implications sank in. The human with the laughable Callsign had just announced herself as a legitimate contender. The championship race was held in the Maelstrom sector, a region of space where 3 different stellar phenomena created the most challenging racing environment in the galaxy. Maya's ship sat in the starting formation alongside 17 other vessels, each one piloted by a champion from their respective species. The pre-race ceremonies were broadcast across the galaxy, with commentary provided by the legendary Vorthan pilot Callsign himself, the same being whose record had stood for 285 years. His ancient voice carried the weight of millennia as he analyzed each contestant. The Centauri pilot Vorik brings superior reflexes and mathematical precision, Callsign intoned. The Corvanian representative Vex combines centuries of experience with natural aggression. The ethereal pilot Mist possesses computational abilities that border on precognition. When he reached Maya, Callsign's voice carried a note of curiosity. The human pilot Torres represents an interesting anomaly. Her species lacks the physical advantages of other contestants, yet her qualifying performance suggests capabilities we do not yet understand. Maya barely heard the commentary. She was deep in communion with her ship, feeling the subtle vibrations of the engines and the whisper of solar wind against the hull. The neural interface allowed her to sense the vessel's condition with unprecedented intimacy, but it also opened her mind to influences that most pilots filtered out. The other racers were focused inward. Their consciousness merged with their ship's artificial intelligence. Maya deliberately kept part of her awareness external, feeling the gravitational currents and electromagnetic fields that surrounded them. Where others saw empty space, she sensed a living environment full of subtle forces and hidden patterns. The race began with a thunderous acceleration that would have liquefied an unprotected human. Maya's ship shot forward alongside the others, but she immediately began to diverge from the standard racing line. The other pilots were following computer-calculated paths that prioritized safety and fuel efficiency. Maya was chasing something else, the flows and currents that her human intuition could sense but not explain. The first section of the course took them through the nebula of screaming winds. The electromagnetic storms here were so intense that most ships relied entirely on their sensors, flying blind through the chaos. Maya did something that made the eye question her sanity. She turned off the automated navigation and flew by instinct. The nebulous storms weren't random. They followed patterns created by the interaction of solar wind, magnetic fields, and the gravity wells beyond. Maya's human brain, evolved to recognize patterns in natural phenomena, could sense the underlying structure where alien logic saw only chaos. She wove between lightning bolts that could vaporize a moon, riding the electromagnetic currents like a surfer on a wave. Her ship's hull temperature soared beyond safe limits, but Maya pushed forward, trusting her instincts over the AI's warnings. Behind her, the other pilots struggled to maintain their planned courses. The Centauri pilot Vorik, despite his superior reflexes, found himself repeatedly outmaneuvered by electromagnetic pulses he couldn't predict. The Corvanian Vex's aggressive approach resulted in several near-catastrophic encounters with gravity wells. Maya emerged from the nebula in second place, having gained 12 positions through techniques that defied conventional racing wisdom. More importantly, she had done it while using less fuel than any other pilot. Her intuitive navigation had found the most efficient paths through the chaos. The second section brought them to the gravity wells of doom, where the remnants of a collapsed star system created a three-dimensional maze of twisted spacetime. Here, the alien pilot's superior spatial processing should have given them an insurmountable advantage. Instead, Maya's human experience with three-dimensional movement in Earth's oceans proved invaluable. She navigated the gravity wells like a dolphin diving through underwater currents, using the gravitational forces to accelerate her ship in ways that computer models said were impossible. The technique was so unconventional that it took the race commentators several minutes to understand what they were witnessing. Maya was treating the gravity wells not as obstacles to avoid, but as tools to exploit. Her ship spiraled through the twisted spacetime, gaining velocity with each maneuver. As she approached the final section of the course, Maya held first place by a margin that shocked galactic observers. But the stellar graveyard lay ahead, a region where the hulks of ancient starships created a maze of debris that had claimed more lives than any other racing hazard. Here, Maya's human adaptability would face its ultimate test. The stellar graveyard stretched before Maya like a monument to cosmic violence. Thousands of ship hulks drifted in the void, their twisted metal forms creating a three-dimensional labyrinth that had claimed 132 pilots over the centuries. The debris field was so dense that most racers relied on predetermined routes, following paths calculated by supercomputers. and refined over generations, Maya's ship plunged into the graveyard at velocities that made the AI's warnings sound like screams. Behind her, the surviving pilots followed their careful, calculated routes, their ship's computers guiding them through the safest passages. Maya was doing something that bordered on madness. She was improvising her path in real time. The key was something uniquely human, the ability to see stories and patterns. Where alien pilots saw random debris, Maya saw the history of each wreck. A battleship's hull, twisted in a specific way, told the story of how it had died. A merchant vessel's cargo pods, scattered in a particular pattern, revealed the explosion that had killed it. Each wreck was a chapter in a vast narrative that only human intuition could read. Maya's ship wove between the hulks with fluid grace, her path appearing suicidal to outside observers. She squeezed through gaps that were barely wider than her ship, scraped past debris that should have shredded her hull, and executed maneuvers that violated every principle of safe navigation. The AI's protests had become a constant background noise that Maya had learned to ignore. Instead, she listened to something deeper, the whisper of solar wind through the debris, the subtle gravitational influences of the larger hulks, the way cosmic radiation painted invisible highways through the graveyard. A massive dreadnought loomed ahead, its hull split open like a flower of death. The safe route went around it, adding precious seconds to the journey. Maya saw something different, a path straight through the wreck's interior, threading between collapsed bulkheads and twisted support beams. The passage was so narrow that her ship's sensors couldn't map it properly, but Maya's human depth perception, evolved from millions of years of navigating three-dimensional forests, could see the way through. She dove into the dreadnought's corpse, her ship's hull scraping against ancient armor plating. The passage twisted and turned, requiring constant micro-adjustments that would have overwhelmed any automated system. Maya flew by pure instinct, her hands dancing across the controls as she navigated by feel rather than sight. Behind her, the other pilots watched in horror as her ship disappeared into what they considered certain death. The Zentari pilot Vorik tried to follow her route, but was forced to abort when his ship's computer refused to comply with such a dangerous maneuver. The Corvanian Vex's aggressive approach resulted in a collision with a support beam that sent him spinning out of control. Maya emerged from the dreadnought's interior having gained an additional 3 seconds, a margin that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. More importantly, she had done it while maintaining perfect control of her ship, her human reflexes and intuition working in harmony to achieve something that alien logic deemed impossible. The final obstacle was the maze of mirrors, a section where the debris included the hulks of ships equipped with reflective armor. The twisted metal created a hall of mirrors effect that confused most sensors and made navigation a nightmare. The standard approach was to reduce speed and navigate carefully, using active scanning to distinguish between real obstacles and reflections. Maya accelerated. The technique she employed was based on something every human child learned instinctively: how to navigate a hall of mirrors at a carnival. The trick wasn't to rely on technology, but to trust peripheral vision and pattern recognition. Maya's human brain, evolved to detect predators hiding in complex environments, could distinguish between real threats and false reflections. Her ship shot through the maze of mirrors like a bullet, weaving between real obstacles while ignoring the phantom images that would have confused any computer. The other pilots, following their careful, methodical approaches, fell further behind with each passing second. As Maya approached the final straight stretch to the finish line, her ship's chronometer showed a time that made her heart race. She was on pace not just to win the championship, but to shatter the ancient record that had stood for 285 years. The finish line blazed ahead, marked by sensor buoys that would record her time with nanosecond precision. Maya's ship screamed toward the line, its engines pushed beyond their design limits, its hull glowing with the heat of atmospheric friction from the debris field. She crossed the line and immediately began to decelerate, her ship's systems finally allowed to cool down from their impossible exertion. The timer displayed a number that sent shockwaves through the galactic racing community: 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Maya had just broken the most enduring record in galactic sports by 36 seconds. The silence that followed Maya's victory was deafening. Across the galaxy, alien spectators stared at their displays in disbelief, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The human pilot with the mocking Callsign had not only won the Mutakoga championship but had shattered a record that had stood longer than most civilizations had existed. In the Maelstrom sector, Maya's ship drifted slowly toward the finish line platform as rescue crews scrambled to assist the other pilots. Several ships had suffered critical damage attempting to match her impossible maneuvers, and the Centauri pilot Vorik was being treated for neural feedback injuries after his ship's computer had overloaded trying to process her racing line. Maya emerged from her cockpit to find herself surrounded by a crowd of alien officials, journalists, and racing experts. Their various forms of communication created a cacophony of questions and demands for explanation. How had she navigated the stellar graveyard so quickly? What technology had she used to predict the nebulous patterns? How had her ship survived the thermal stress of her maneuvers? The answer was simpler than any of them could comprehend. She had flown like a human. Commander Thax, the Corvanian flight instructor who had doubted her abilities, approached with something resembling reverence in his golden eyes. "Torres," he said, his gravelly voice carrying a note of awe, "I owe you an apology. Your species' capabilities were underestimated." Maya smiled, exhaustion and triumph warring in her expression. "We're good at being underestimated, sir." The legendary Vorthan pilot Callsign requested a private meeting with Maya, his ancient form supported by a gravity manipulation device that had kept him alive for over 3 centuries. When they met in the station's quiet observation deck, his words carried the weight of eons. "In my youth," Callsign said, his voice like wind through crystal caves, "I believed that perfection in racing came from eliminating all variables, from achieving perfect harmony between pilot and machine. You have shown me that chaos itself can be a tool. That imperfection can be a strength." "It's not about chaos," Maya replied, watching the stars through the viewport. "It's about finding patterns where others see randomness. My grandmother used to say that humans are the universe's way of understanding itself. We see connections that pure logic misses." Callsign's ancient eyes studied her with newfound respect. "Your record will stand as a monument to human potential. But more than that, it will remind us that the galaxy is vast enough for many different approaches to excellence." The victory celebration that followed was unlike anything in galactic racing history. Representatives from hundreds of species came to honor not just Maya's achievement, but the recognition that human capabilities had been systematically undervalued. The human colonial authority, previously considered a minor power, suddenly found itself inundated with requests for cultural and technological exchange. Maya's Callsign, once a source of mockery, became a symbol of human resilience and adaptability. Lucky was no longer seen as a joke, but as a testament to the human ability to create their own fortune through determination and ingenuity. In the months that followed, human pilots began appearing in racing circuits throughout the galaxy. They brought with them techniques that alien racers had never considered, using intuition over calculation, embracing chaos as a tool, and finding patterns in complexity that computer models couldn't predict. The Galactic Racing Academy established new training programs that incorporated human approaches to piloting. The rigid, mathematical perfection that had dominated racing for millennia gave way to a more fluid, adaptive style that emphasized the pilot's ability to read and respond to changing conditions. Maya's victory had done more than break a record. It had broken the assumption that human limitations were permanent. Her 36-second improvement over the ancient record became a symbol of what was possible when human potential was unleashed rather than constrained. Years later, when young pilots from across the galaxy trained at the academy, they would study recordings of Maya's race not just for its technical brilliance, but for its demonstration of a fundamental truth, that the universe rewards those who dare to think differently, who trust their instincts even when logic says they should fail. The aliens had laughed at her Callsign, but Maya Torres had proven that sometimes you make your own luck. In a galaxy that valued perfection above all else, she had shown that human imperfection, the ability to adapt, to improvise, to find meaning in chaos, might be the greatest strength of all. Her record would eventually be broken, but her legacy would endure. that humans belonged among the stars, not despite their differences, but because of them.